Mr. Toricampo?
Yes, I am.
It's
Nice to meet you. Where's Mr. Teokson?
Mr. Teokson is staying at home to watch our kids and to prepare our dinner. I'm not going to be here long. I've come here just to introduce myself and to tell you that you and I are cousins.
Cousins?
Yes, we are cousins. You don't know me because you lived in Bato, while I lived in Virac. But my parents and I know your parents, your paternal grandparents, and most of our other relatives.
My father and grandfather died years ago.
I met both your father and your grandfather when they were still living. My grandparents, my parents, and I kept track of our relatives because our families have a very interesting story which I'm going to tell you if you care to listen.
Oh yes, tell it please.
A long, long time ago, there lived in your town of Bato a very wealthy man. His wealth consisted of agricultural lands. He loaned out his lands to the farmers who produced crops of rice and corn and in turn paid with portions or shares of their crops. And he had a granary to store his grains.
What was that man's name? How many years ago did that happen?
That man was one of our ancestors, and my story begins with him. But I don't know what his name was, and I don't know how many years ago the story started. The story has been passed down from one generation to another by word of mouth only. Therefore, too many details have been lost. Since I don't know the man's name, I'll just refer to him as the rich man. He had one and only one son, who was a drunk womanizer and gambler. I don't know his name either, so I'll just refer to him as the son. The rich man dreamed a life of ease and comfort for his son. But the son had other thoughts. He was not content with a life of ease and comfort, in fact. He felt that he was living a drab life. He wanted a life of merrymaking, full of excitements. In those days, there were no recreational establishments, so he dreamed of a life of drinking, mistresses, and gambling. In those days, land titles were like negotiable instruments. Ownership of a piece of land could be transferred from one person to another simply by signing an endorsement on the title. And any family member who was at least 18 years old could sell a piece of family property by endorsing the title. The rich man kept his land titles in a box in a cabinet. He was very confident that they would be safe there because robberies and burglaries were unheard of in those days. Everybody in the town knew everybody. Besides, he knew that his land could not be stolen simply by stealing the titles. They must be endorsed with the owner's signature as proof of consent to transfer ownership. But one day, he found out that all but 2 of the titles were gone. The title to the house and the title to the granary are the only 2 that he found. The titles to the rice and cornfields were all gone. They had been stolen, and he had only one suspect, his own son, who was capable of endorsing those titles. When the rich man confronted the son, he denied at first, but after some grilling, he admitted that he had indeed sold their lands and squandered the money on drinking, on women, and on gambling. Then the rich man, in his rage and disgust for his prodigal son, cursed him and his descendants down to the 7th generation to life of an abject poverty and suffering. The prodigal son begged for forgiveness, but his father never forgave him, and so the curse took effect. The son lived as a wretched beggar for the rest of his life, and so did his children, grandchildren, and subsequent descendants. But the curse became weaker and weaker, generation after generation, and each generation suffering less than the previous ones did. Mr. Toricampo, you and I are of the 7th generation. You, our cousins, and I are still bearing the yoke of that curse, but I'm happy that my children and your future children are free.
You really believe that, Miss Teokson?
Absolutely, I believe it, because I can feel it in my grandparents, in my parents, and in me. I wish I had more time to talk with you, but I have to go because my husband and my children must be waiting for me by now for dinner. Good night, and good luck to you, Mr. Toricampo.
Good night, Miss Teokson.
I was that young man to whom Mrs. Jackson told the story almost 57 years ago. I did not believe it then, but I do believe it now. I'll never become rich because of the curse of an ancestor, but I feel okay because the curse fades and ends with me, and my descendants are free. To my descendants and future descendants, I have this piece of advice. Freedom from the curse alone won't make you rich. Just like people who already have become rich, you need to be smart and work hard in an atmosphere of freedom, of course. Thanks for listening.